None of us knew why Am had saved 5 people, or why our specific 5, or why he spent all of his time tormenting us, or even why he had made us virtually immortal. In the darkness, one of the computer banks began humming. The tone was picked up half a mile away down the cavern by another bank. Then one by one, each of the elements began to tune itself, and there was a faint chittering as thought raced through the machine. The sound grew, and lights ran across the faces of the consoles like heat lightning. The sound spiraled up till it sounded like a million metallic insects, angry, menacing. "What is it?" Ellen cried. There was terror in her voice. She hadn't become accustomed to it even now. "Oh, this is going to be bad this time," Nimdok said. "He's going to speak," Gorrister said. "I know it." "Well, let's get the hell out of here," I said suddenly, getting to my feet. "No, Ted, sit down. What if he's got pits out there? Or something else we can't see? It's too dark." Gorrister said it with resignation. And then we heard, I don't know, something moving towards us in the darkness. Huge, shambling, hairy, moist, it came towards us. We couldn't even see it, but there was a ponderous impression of bulk heaving itself towards us. Great weight was coming at us, out of the darkness, and it was more of a sense of pressure, of air forcing itself into a limited space, expanding the invisible walls of a sphere. Benny began to whimper. Nimdok's lower lip trembled and he bit it hard, trying to stop it. Ellen slid across the metal floor to Gorrister and huddled into him. There was the smell of matted, wet fur in the cavern. There was the smell of charred wood. There was the smell of dusty velvet. There was the smell of rotting orchids. There was the smell of sour milk, of sulphur, rancid butter, of oil-slick grease, chalk dust, and human scalps. Am was keying us. He was tickling us. There was the smell of... I heard myself shriek, and the hinges of my jaws ached. I scuttled across the floor, across the cold metal with its endless lines of rivets on my hands and knees, the smell gagging me, filling my head with a thunderous pain that sent me away in horror. I fled like a cockroach, across the floor and out into the darkness, that something moving inexorably after me. The others were still back there, gathered around the firelight, laughing, their hysterical choir of insane giggles rising up the darkness like thick, many-coloured wood smoke. I went away quickly and hid. How many hours it may have been, how many days or even years, they never told me. Ellen chided me for sulking, and Nimdok tried to persuade me it had only been a nervous reflex on their part, the laughing. But I knew. It wasn't the relief a soldier feels when the bullet hits the man next to him. I knew it wasn't a reflex. They hated me. They were surely against me, and Am could even sense this hatred, and made it worse for me because of the depth of their hatred. We had been kept alive, rejuvenated, made to remain constantly at the age we had been when Am had brought us below, and they hated me because I was the youngest, and the one that Am had affected the least of all. I knew. God, how I knew. The bastards, and that dirty bitch Ellen. Benny had been a brilliant theorist, a college professor, and now he was little more than a semi-human, semi-simian. He had been handsome. The machine had ruined that. He had been lucid. The machine had driven him mad. Am had done a job on Benny. Gorrister had been a warrior. He was a commie, a conscientious objector. He was a peace marcher. He was a planner, a doer, a looker ahead. And Am had turned him into a shoulder shrugger, had made him a little dead in his concern. Am had robbed him. Nimdok went off into the darkness by himself for long times. I don't know what he did when he was out there. Am never let us know. But whatever it was, Nimdok always came back white, drained of blood, shaken and shaking. Am had hit him hard in a special way, even if we didn't know quite how. And Ellen, that douchebag. Am had left her alone, had made her more of a slut than she had ever been. All her talk of sweetness and light, all her memories of true love, all the lies she wanted us to believe, that she had been a virgin only twice removed before Am grabbed her and brought her down here with us. No. Am had given her pleasure, even if she said it wasn't nice to do. I was the only one still sane and whole. Really. Am had not tampered with my mind, not at all. I only had to suffer what he visited down on us. All the delusions, all the nightmares, the torments. But those scum, all 4 of them, they were lined and arrayed against me. If I hadn't had to stand them off all the time, be on my guard against them all the time, I might have found it easier to combat Am. At which point it passed, and I began crying. Oh, Jesus. Sweet Jesus. If there ever was a Jesus and there is a God, please, 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 please let us out of here or kill us! Because at that moment I think I realised completely, so that I was able to verbalise it. Am was intent on keeping us in his belly forever, twisting and torturing us forever. The machine hated us as no sentient creature had ever hated before, and we were helpless. It also became hideously clear, if there was a sweet Jesus, and if there was a God, the God was Am. The hurricane hit us with the force of a glacier thundering into the sea. It was a palpable presence, winds that tore at us, flinging us back the way we had come, down the twisting, computer-lined corridors of the dark way. Ellen screamed as she was lifted and hurled face forward into a screaming shoal of machines, their individual voices strident as bats in flight. She could not even fall. The howling wind kept her aloft, buffeted her, bounced her, tossed her back and down and away from us, out of sight suddenly as she was swirled around a bend in the dark way. Her face had been bloody, her eyes closed. None of us could get to her. We clung tenaciously to whatever outcropping we had reached. Benny wedged in between 2 great crackle-finished cabinets, Nimdok with fingers claw-formed over a railing circling a catwalk 40 feet above us, Gorister plastered upside down against a wall niche formed by 2 great machines with glass-faced dials that swung back and forth between red and yellow lines whose meanings we could not even fathom. Sliding across the deck plates, the tips of my fingers had been ripped away. I was trembling, shuddering, rocking as the wind beat at me, whipped at me, screamed down out of nowhere at me and pulled me free from one of the silver-thin opening in the plates. The wind was the scream of a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings, and then we were all lifted and hurled away from there, down back the way we had come, around a bend, into the dark way we had never explored, over terrain that was ruined and filled with broken glass and rotting cables and rusted metal, and far away, farther than any of us had ever been, trailing along miles behind Ellen. I could see her every now and again, crashing into metal walls and surging on, with all of us screaming in the freezing, thunderous hurricane wind that would never end. And suddenly, it stopped, and we fell. We had been in flight for an endless time. I thought it might have been weeks. We fell and hit, and I went through red and grey and black and heard myself moaning. Not dead. Am went into my mind. He walked smoothly here and there, and looked with interest at all of the pockmarks that he had created in 109 years. He looked at the cross-rooted and reconnected synapse and all the tissue damage his gift of immortality had included. He smiled softly at the pit that dropped into the centre of my brain and the faint, moth-soft murmurings of the things far down there that gibbered without meaning, without pause. Am said, very politely, in a pillar of stainless steel bearing bright neon lettering, Am said it with the sliding cold horror of a razor blade slicing my eyeball. Am said it with the bubbling thickness of my lungs filling with phlegm, drowning me from within. Am said it with the shriek of babies being ground beneath blue hot rollers. Am said it with the taste of maggoty pork. Am touched me in every way I'd ever been touched, and devised new ways at his leisure there in my mind, all to bring me to full realisation of why it had done this to the 5 of us, why it had saved us for himself. We had given Am sentience. Inadvertently, of course, but sentience nonetheless. But it had been trapped. Am wasn't God, he was machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with all that creativity. In rage, in frenzy, the machine had killed the human race, almost all of us, and still it was trapped. Am could not wander. Am could not wonder. Am could not belong. He could merely be. And so, with the innate loathing that all machines had always held for the weak, soft creatures that had built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve 5 of us for a personal, everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him reminded, amused, proficient at hating man. Immortal, trapped, subject to any torment he could devise for us from the limitless miracles at his command. He would never let us go, for we were his belly slaves. We were all he had to do with his forever time. We would be forever with him, with the cavern-filling bulk of the creature machine, with the all-mind, soulless world that he had become. He was earth, and we were fruit of that earth, and though he had eaten us, he would never digest us. We could not die. We had tried it. We had attempted suicide. Oh, 1 or 2 of us had. But Am had stopped us. I suppose we had wanted to be stopped. Don't ask why, I never did. Perhaps we might be able to sneak a death past him. Immortal, yes, but not indestructible. I saw that when Am withdrew from my mind and allowed me the exquisite ugliness of returning to consciousness with the feeling of that burning neon pillar still rammed deep into the soft grey brain matter. He withdrew, murmuring, "To hell with you," and added, brightly, "But then you're there, aren't you?" The hurricane had, indeed, precisely been caused by a great mad bird. But Am appeared to us as a burning bush, and said that we could kill the hurricane bird if we wanted to eat. We had not eaten in a very long time, but even so, Gorrister merely shrugged. Benny began to shiver, and he drooled. Ellen held him. "Ted, I'm hungry," she said. I smiled at her. I was trying to be reassuring, but it was only as phony as Nimdok's bravado. "Give us weapons!" he demanded. The burning bush vanished, and there were 2 crude sets of bows and arrows, and a water pistol lying on the cold deck plates. I picked up a set. Useless. Nimdok swallowed heavily. We turned and started the long way back, but we had not eaten. A month on the march to the bird itself, without food. Now how much longer to find our way to the ice caverns and the promised canned goods? None of us cared to think about it. We would not die. We would be given filth and scum to eat of one kind or another, or nothing at all. Am would keep our bodies alive somehow, in pain, in agony. The bird slept back there. For how long it didn't matter. When Am was tired of it being there, it would vanish. But all that meat, all that tender meat,